As the slides are coming up, just take an informal survey. How many career startup junkies, creatives, artists, designers, and freelancers do we have in the crowd? Okay, so this is what we could call the aisle of the misfit toys, right? Those of you that are familiar with the story and the trials of the round-eared elf and what all that meant to him and how that played into Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, will kind of get some of this. But I want to talk to you about something that I call the idea movement. It's how we transform from all the legacies of the past, the things we've just heard Becky talk about, this unlikely place where we live, where great entrepreneurs have built world-leading companies. How do we turn that into a lasting movement in creating a startup venture ecosystem that's inclusive, that includes what I'm going to describe as the idea movement? So as a startup founder, as a freelancer, as an individual creative, a lot of times you face a lot of fears. You're out there alone. You're not necessarily in a large corporation. You're not in a big organization. You feel a bit like a pioneer. In that way, I think we all, self-included, having been through the startup process 7 times, have in our DNA that pioneering spirit that led people to this country and this place. That's a differentiator on a worldwide basis. But you feel alone. Sometimes when you're standing on the edge of that cliff, you wonder, am I going to jump off and figure out how to open the parachute on the way down? Am I going to have somebody to talk to about what's at the bottom of the hill? Is there a path down to the bottom of the hill? Would it be safer to walk? Do I turn around and go the other way? You're faced with all those sorts of dilemmas. And yes, that startup founder, that individual freelancer, that creative, they did build that, but they had help. They had help along the way. Kauffman Foundation says that 85% of all new net job creation comes from startup ventures. 85%. Both sides of the political spectrum understand that it's important. It's important. Through that creativity, that innovation, that entrepreneurial spirit, great things arise. Everybody thought Sam Walton was crazy when he said, yeah, my plan is to go into discount retail, and I'm going to go to all the places where people aren't, those cities that are less than 50,000 people, and I'm going to build this great infrastructure. Sears and Penny's all thought that was hilarious at the time. Turns out they didn't have the last laugh in that deal. McKinsey also talks about the innovation heat map, this idea that capital and talent are going to migrate to those regions in the world that have a high quality of life. These things all fit together. Innovation, entrepreneurship, education, economic development, a great place to live, they're all inexorably tied together. So it's important that we all pay attention to these issues. I'm going to talk from my perspective, having been back in the state for 12 years. I'm a Harrison High School graduate from 1980. I left for 20 years and quite honestly never thought I'd come back. Spent time in the military, involved in startup ventures, involved in the corporate setting, had the opportunity to come back in 2001. So my window on the recent history of Arkansas is going to be with that context to kind of set the stage. And I'm giving this presentation more as a participant and maybe as a champion for the cause and as an observer as much as anything else. I can't take credit really for any of what's happened. We constantly fight this perception that in Arkansas we're a bunch of big gun-toting, gap-toothed, slack-jawed hillbillies wearing overalls, and that is pretty impressive gun he's got there. I can't imagine how many people had to hold it the first time he fired it. But this is a perception we face. When we go out to talk to people on the coast, they can't imagine that there's anything fantastic being created in this little neck of the woods. In fact, most of them from either coast couldn't even find Arkansas on the map. You know, they'd put a finger on Arizona or North Dakota. They wouldn't have any idea. So we fight this perception, but as Becky previously said, having a little bit of that edge, a little bit of that chip on our shoulder, a little bit of the secret sauce that we've got something special going on here is actually a competitive advantage. It may even be an unfair competitive advantage. So what is this movement? I talked about this idea of the idea movement. Let's put a name to it. This was a concept that was developed by Missouri State University when they were looking to revitalize a creative district from an industrial sector that had been forgotten near the campus. They called it the Idea District. And their whole idea for the Idea District was that innovators, designers, entrepreneurs, and artists where the creatives that if brought together in the right setting would have the opportunity, as Thor Muller, the writer of a book of How to Get Lucky about serendipity, he's a Silicon Valley guy, those creative collisions from creative people are where the magic happens. That's where that community rises up and starts to do amazing things. So I'm going to continue to talk about this idea movement and how it's grown in our place. So to create this idea ecosystem, what does that look like? What are the components in an ideal world? If you look at places where this is strong, like Silicon Valley or Austin or Boston, you typically have a research university that creates, generates, builds up the talent that you need, the great ideas, the infrastructure. It's there to kind of be the engine, developing those new ideas. You also have to have a startup culture. You have to have people out in the community that are doing it. You have to have some successes that you can point to. We've certainly got that. And then finally, you have to have the grease for the wheel. You have to have that early stage venture capital, not traditional banking, but those intrepid early stage, what I call triple F group, friends, family, and fools initially, that are going to bet on those companies that they can be something bigger than what they appear. So how has this progressed? Well, we were kind of in the wilderness in 2001. There really wasn't a lot going on. Sure, we had the successes of the past, but in anything new economy, digital economy, intellectual property-driven stuff, there really wasn't a lot going on in any sector. We did have this legacy of great things that had happened, but there wasn't a whole lot going on. 2012, we made a lot of progress. We still have a long way to go, but we made a lot of progress, and I'm going to talk about some of how we got there. So for any kind of movement, it can't be sort of an autocratic mandate. It can't be something that someone from the top legislates or demands or requires. It's got to be something that is owned from those people that are part of the movement. Those people at the grassroots, those creatives, they're the ones that have to take charge of it, have to stand up and own it, have to move it forward, have to organize events like TED. You guys are the ones that own it. From a programmatic standpoint, states and federal governments and other nonprofits, we have to be supportive. We have to be kind of stealthy. We have to be kind of behind the scenes. Our job is to remove the friction points, to provide the support where needed, but to not make anybody feel like, yeah, it's just another institutional directive. Movements are strongest, as we saw in that video, when one individual, crazy person, stands up with a wild idea and other people that are willing to go down that path join them. So where the magic happens for us is that boundary layer. It's where all the things that governments and individual larger organizations can do meet a movement that is owned by the grassroots. That's where the magic can really happen. How did it look in 2001? If we think about it in terms of a context with 4 components, programs, placemaking, events, and networking, there was a lot of stuff going on from a state standpoint. Arkansas Development Finance Authority had some programs to raise venture capital and to sponsor entrepreneurship. Arkansas Science and Technology had some things that were kind of university-oriented. Arkansas Economic Development Council started thinking about tax credits. And then you had Northwest Arkansas Council, which was run by a lot of the business leaders from the existing flagship organizations. And they thought about things like, how do we get 540 done? How do we build the airport? How do we get Beaver Water District put together? But that's really all there was. Some of the rest of this grassroots stuff wasn't happening. No one believed at that point. 2006, some other activities start to happen. Donald W. Williams Governor's Cup contest. All of a sudden, we've got college students that are competing. They're building great business plans. They're getting up in front of crowds like this. They're slinging their ideas. They're being judged. They're really launching great ideas. You've got Elevate Forums, a forum for mid-size and early-stage CEOs to get together and kind of have an encounter with other people that are fellow travelers, people that are going down the same path. These things begin to build community, and in 2012, we made progress. And it's largely due to many of the people that are in this crowd and others that are like you. We said, why can't we have a Creatives United group where people get up like this on a regular basis and talk about what they're doing? Why can't we have an elevator pitch contest so people can get up and test their ideas in front of this kind of a crowd on a regular basis? Why can't we get together for drinks with other techies? So all of these sorts of things have happened. Some of them have been top-down, but the vast majority of the good things that you see here have been driven by folks much just like you. How did this happen? How did this come about? Why is this important? Well, people stood up. People really didn't wait to wonder what was in it for them or how they were going to get some kind of return. The one real differentiator for this region and this state is that people here are willing to help. They're willing to cheer you on. They're not going to steal your idea. They want to see you succeed. We should take great pride in that. That's not uniformly true everywhere. Certainly not everywhere in the world, and not everywhere in the U.S. Individuals move beyond their job descriptions. A lot of people that got this thing moving didn't sit there and say, well, that's not really what I'm supposed to be doing. They found the time to make this happen. That 18 to 35-year-old crowd that I love spending so much of my time with, they didn't realize that what we were trying to do was impossible. And so they just went and did it, and they didn't ask permission. Finally, they got out of the building and they found kindred spirits. Very little goodness happens when you stay in your own cubicle, inside the own four walls of wherever you work. People got out to the coffee shops. They got out to the meeting places. They got out to places like the Iceberg down in Fayetteville. They got out to these events. Those creative collisions started to happen more and more. And at that point, I would say, we're at the beginning of a really interesting movement in the state. There is no better place anywhere, in my judgment, than Northwest Arkansas and Arkansas for this movement to take hold. We've got all the right ingredients. Are we starting to realize that we're exiting the wilderness? Is anybody else outside the state realizing that we're not all gigantic gun-toting rednecks driving rusted-out pickup trucks? Well, apparently they are. Entrepreneur Online listed Northwest Arkansas as one of the 9 unexpected emerging areas for startup companies, a hotspot. Fast Company highlighted the area as being a fantastic place for spin-outs from Walmart and things like retail and customer insights and digital media. The graduate business plan competitions that the UA has dominated both within the state, they've actually been the most successful major university for the last 4 years at the graduate level on a nationwide basis. MIT and the University of Texas stand in fear when the U of A graduate teams come to the business plan competitions. We should take a lot of pride in that. And the Kauffman Foundation says we're 15th most entrepreneurial state in 2011. There was a time when we were always thankful that Mississippi was next door. We could kind of point to them and say, well, at least we're not 50th. I can tell you there's a lot of people around the state that say we don't have to stand in line behind anybody. And that's what buoys me every day. So, we're trying to figure out a way to communicate. What can you do? What's the call to action? How can you become part of it? First of all, get involved. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of confusion in the marketplace. Anytime you have this creative activity, not everybody knows what's going on. So we came up with this hashtag ARIDEA. Anytime you do something within the creative space, the startup space, the early stage venture capital space, send out a tweet about it. If it's an event, it's an opportunity to get together, formal, informal, start using that tag so we can capture some attention. And finally, and I want to close with this, we have some unbelievable stories in the state, some of which you've already heard. But one of the favorite things I ever heard said was said by J.B. Hunt. We should never let anyone build a fence around our dreams. We can certainly all be the masters of our own destiny, and there's no limits on the upside for what those of you who are already in the idea movement can do. Thank you very much.